Greetings, friend, and welcome to the Between the Covers podcast, where we are working every day to remove the self limiting beliefs that are preventing us from becoming the heroes of our own stories. I am Marcus Spar, and a quick reminder here that if you are benefiting from this podcast, if you're enjoying it, if it's providing you some kind of insights, I would greatly appreciate it if you left this podcast a rating and a review on iTunes, on Spotify, or wherever it is that you listen to your favorite podcasts. And if you're watching the video version on YouTube, please give this video a like and subscribe, leave a comment. I would love to engage with you. Today, I want to talk about speaking our truths. This is something that I find to be very important, especially when I am working with clients and we're talking about just the impacts of our stories on our current behaviors and our current beliefs. And this can be summarized really in the difference between two words. And the words are but and and. But and. What's the difference between these? Great example. I've heard this so many times from clients. It's something I've said many, many times in the past. And that is, yeah, my parents let me down when I was growing up, but they did the best that they could. They really did the best that they could. What does the word but do in that sentence? It completely negates everything that was said before. Yeah, my parents let me down when I was growing up, but they did the best that they could. The focus is on how they did the best that they could. I am minimizing the impact of being let down or even being harmed by family, by parents. I'll use myself as an example again. I enjoy art and being creative through art, but I'm not going to be as good as my partner Libby is. What's the focus? The focus is on how I'm not going to be as good as Libby in terms of art. I really wanted to spend some time with my friends today, but things happened, they got busy and they weren't able to. What's the focus? The fact that things got busy and they weren't able to get together. When we are speaking our truth, a key dynamic in speaking our truth is getting rid of the word but, and we want to replace it with and. Because when we think of that word, what the word but does is it gives it an either or dynamic. It's one or the other. Either my parents had let me down or that they did the best that they could. Either I love doing art and I love expressing creativity through art, or I'm not as good as Libby. I wanted to spend time with friends today, or things just got too busy and it didn't happen. That's what the word but does. Is it creates an either or. It makes things to a certain degree, I guess you could even say it's clear cut, though I would definitely argue that it doesn't make it clear cut at all. Let's replace the word but with and in these situations. When speaking my truth, my parents let me down when I was growing up, and they did the best that they could. I am able to hold both of those at the same time. Yes, my parents did let me down. And yes, they did the best that they could. That is my truth. And that is the truth of many people out there. I love art. I love to draw and I love to express my creativity through art. And I'm not as good as my partner Libby. Both of those are true. I don't need to focus so much on the fact that my final products don't come out the same way that Libby's does. I can still enjoy being creative through art, through visual medium. I wanted to spend time with friends, and things came up and they weren't able to. They're both true. That is my truth. And what I want to challenge you on is when you consider these statements, when you're talking about a belief that you have, when you're talking about some behaviors that you have, when you talk about decisions that you've made, if you find yourself using but, what happens if you switch it to and? I was raised Christian, and that doesn't serve me anymore. There are a great many things that I learned from the Christian tradition. And at the same time, there are a lot of things that do not serve me in that tradition anymore. And it made sense for me to move on. If I said, I grew up a Christian, but there are things in Christianity that don't serve me anymore, then I'm disregarding the things that I did learn that have served me and that still do serve me. I like to write and I enjoy writing, but I have crippling anxiety around putting my works out there. I'm completely disregarding the love and the joy that I get from this kind of creative endeavor. I can say, I enjoy and love to write, and I also have crippling anxiety that makes it hard for me to put my writing out there. I am a good partner to Libby, but I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. Let's switch that around. I am a good partner to Libby, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. That's my truth. My truth is both at the same time. It doesn't have to be either or. And so I want to challenge you, my friend, to think of your truth. Think of one of those statements where you find yourselves saying one half of the statement and then there is a but between it. What happens if you make that an and? Statement one and statement two. That is your truth. And it is important that we speak our truth because a lot of times what I have seen and what I've experienced is if you don't speak your truth, someone else is going to speak the truth for you. And they don't always have all the right information. This is something that comes from spiritual leaders, comes from coaches, comes from guides, comes from therapists, comes from parents, comes from family, even comes from friends. If we're not speaking our truth, someone else is going to speak the truth for us. And if they don't have all the information about what you've been through, who you are, your thoughts and your emotions in that moment, then they could be speaking the wrong truth. So consider replacing the word but with the word and truly speak your truth in these situations. And you just might be surprised at what comes out of your mouth when you say this. And it might feel awkward at first. It might even feel like you're not speaking the truth. And I'm going to go back to my Christian upbringing again in this example. One of the things that I heard over and over again from many, many different churches is the nature of how me as a son was supposed to honor my father and my mother. I am very much curious if that's something that you're familiar with. Did you grow up with this notion that you need to honor your father and mother? Even if you didn't grow up in the Christian tradition, it's still a big thing in society. You're supposed to honor your parents. You're supposed to honor your elders. You're supposed to honor all of these people who have come before you and who are guiding you and teaching you. And yet, I have seen this used essentially as a carte blanche to say you can't say anything bad about this person. Well, if we're talking about honoring our parents, if we can't say the truth, then we're not honoring them. If we can't say the truth about those who are teaching us and guiding us and mentoring us, then we're not honoring. We're actually doing the opposite in that situation because honoring these people, it means that we respect them. We respect what they have done. We respect what they are teaching. However, that does not mean that we don't speak the truth about how they have done things that have missed the mark. Because we all have, we all do, and we all will. That is the truth of it. The truth is, we're not going to do things perfectly, and we never will. I am nearing the 15th anniversary of my marriage to Libby. Guess what? I'm not a perfect husband. I'm not a perfect partner. I make mistakes. I fall back into bad habits and bad patterns. I will get stuck in my mind believing things that aren't true. I make mistakes and I will continue to make mistakes now and in the future. That is a part of who I am. That means, as much as I love Libby, I'm not going to show it the best every single day. And that is my truth. Now, that doesn't mean that whenever I'm around people, I just mention all of the bullshit that I've done and the nasty things that I've said and the nasty things that Libby has said to me. No, okay, that's not honoring. That's just kind of dragging them through the mud. However, it's also not honoring to put these people up on a pedestal. In fact, I think about how when we consider very magnificent works of art, especially with something like sculpting, one of the things that seems to be very common is you have to keep your distance with it. It's up on a pedestal. You observe it from a distance. You can admire its beauty, its craftsmanship, but when something is up on a pedestal, you can't get too close to it. If you get too close to it, you might start seeing some of the flaws in it. That is not honoring to these leaders, to these people that mentor and coach and instruct us. That is not honoring to the people who raised us. That's not the truth. The truth is both and. I have let down my family in the past, and I have done the best that I can. And that looks different every single day. The important thing is that both of those are true. I'm not flawless. I don't pretend to be flawless. I don't want to be flawless, as much as my perfectionism wants to disagree with that a lot of the time. That's a lot of pressure. It's very damaging to be someone on that pedestal and fall from it. And it's very damaging to be admiring someone on that pedestal and then having them fall. That's why we need to speak the truth. And my truth is going to be different from your truth. I am not a homosexual. That's not my truth. But that also doesn't mean that someone who is a homosexual or transgender or bisexual, someone who is different from me in terms of sexuality, that doesn't mean that they're incorrect. That's just not my truth. But my truth is not theirs. That's one of the things that I hold on to. That's why for me it is so important for us to speak our truth, to understand our truth. And it is possible, my friend, to have all of these disparate truths coexist. It is possible for us to hold the positive and the negative in our lives. It is possible to hold them together and have them not be in conflict with each other. And it is possible for your positive and your negatives to not be in conflict with someone else's positives and negatives that make up their truth. So speak your truth. Make it a habit. Just a very simple way that I've done this is I've been trying to work out how to get some of my friends to be interviewed on this podcast. And some of them have very busy schedules. And I honor their truth that they're busy and I still want to interview them. My friend John, one of the busiest guys that I know, I reached out to him and it's like, let's see what we can do to get time on the calendar. And I said to him, I know that you are very busy right now. And I could have said, but I still want to interview for my podcast. That would be completely disregarding the fact that he is a busy person. So in my text that I sent to John, I said, I know you are busy and I want to interview you for this podcast because that's his truth and my truth. I know he's busy. He knows that I know that he's busy. And I will take great delight in having him on this podcast to share his journey. I'm going to go back to my challenge here. I challenge you, my friend, to really think about your truth. I challenge you to consider what are ways that you have diminished the impact of others or even the impacts of yourself, and how you are lifting up others in order to honor, in order to respect, when that's really not doing what you're intending it to do. What is your truth? And when you speak your truth, use and. That connection is important. And while we are on this topic, I sincerely hope that you have someone that you can speak to who will honor your truth. Because let's face it, there are a lot of people that do not respect and honor the truth of others. We see so many examples of that in politics, in society, between nations and countries. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that our not honoring the truth of others is one of the things that brings us into conflict a lot. Because if my truth is the ultimate truth, then that means everyone else has to be wrong in their truth. Everyone else has to have it wrong, and I have to have it right. That just creates conflict. That creates misery for everyone. Even the ones who are in power are miserable because they're constantly looking for the next thing that they can take down. They're looking at the next thing that they can stamp out of society. They are looking for any contradictions to their truth in order to maintain that their truth is the ultimate truth. That's just not how this works. We need to be able to hold these together. And it is possible. It is possible for me as a privileged, cisgendered, straight white man to be able to acknowledge and hold the truth of an individual who is colored, doesn't have the same privilege that I do, had a very different upbringing than I did, has systems that work against them. And maybe this is even something that you've experienced. I can still hold your truth, and you can still hold my truth. And I'm not going to lord mine over yours. I want to acknowledge your truth and recognize that things can change and be different. And that also means that I'm going to have to give up a lot of my privilege to make that happen. If you're like me, are you willing to do that? I think one of the important things to end on this conversation with is that holding your truth can be uncomfortable for other people, but it shouldn't be harming them. Discomfort and harm are very different things. Discomfort is an acknowledgement that, oh, yeah, that's true. I really messed up. I shouldn't have said that. I really acted or reacted in a detrimental way. But you speaking your truth, like I think about talking with my dad and even my mom about how there were some things that they had done that wounded me emotionally when I was a child and a teenager. And I was able to talk with them and say, this is what happened. I'm not blaming you for it. I am bringing it to your attention that this is what happened. This is how it impacted me. And this is how I'm trying to work to overcome it. That is uncomfortable for some people to hear. Absolutely. But I didn't cause them any harm. I did not harm them. I did not lord that over them. I did not effectively give them a neener, now it's your turn to feel my pain. No. I honored my pain. I honored them in how they impacted me and how they have loved me. And you know what? My relationship with my mom and my dad, way better than it's been since I was a child. That can be the power of speaking your truth. So I encourage you to do so. It is important. Your truth is important. What has happened to you and how it's impacting you now is important. And it is important that you can change that and you can move forward stronger than you have ever been. And until next time, live strong for today.